Joining us now to discuss the potential impact of these tariffs is Democratic Illinois Congressman Rajna Krishnamoorthi, ranking member of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday.
Hey, good morning so much. Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you a little bit of background information. This is a question I have, and I'm sure there are so many others that are out there, too, that are wondering the same thing. So when we discuss these tariffs and the president's power, what power does Congress actually have to play in the establishment of these tariffs? Does the way that they actually balance the scales in any way? Do they have to have support for the president in order for him to actually impose them?
Well, the president has a lot of latitude, has a lot of discretion in imposing tariffs, especially under his powers with regard to Section 301 of our laws, which are meant for instance, imposing tariffs where there's dumping or economic aggression practiced by other countries like China. So he has a lot of latitude, but kind of across the board tariffs on everything coming from other countries, such as what he's proposed, would, I think, go beyond his authority, and I think would invite a lot of litigation and probably challenges even from Congress.
We talk a little bit about how the tariffs might impact our own bottom lines and the pocketbooks of Americans, but also they would have significant impact on the Chinese and Mexican economies, which are our biggest trading partners, after all. President Biden already criticizing Trump's plans. Let's listen to President Biden, and I'll get your opinion on the other side.
I hope he rethinks it. I think it's a counterproductive thing to do. You know, look, one of the things you've heard me say before, that we have an unusual situation in America. We're surrounded by the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and two allies, Mexico and Canada. And the last thing we need to do is begin to screw up those relationships.
So, Congressman, how exactly would these potential tariffs impact the American economy and Americans just like you and I who have to go out there and get groceries and get the things that we need for our families?
Well, look, I think 25% tariffs on all goods from Mexico and Canada on day one would lead to inflation, and then it would lead to retaliatory tariffs on our exporters, including our farmers in Illinois, for instance. And then it would further drive our friends, partners, and allies from the U.S. I mean, it makes no sense, for instance, to impose, lower tariffs on China, a foreign adversary, than Canada. It doesn't make any sense. And so I think these are the types of issues that will pose considerable problems for American consumers and the economy.
You're part of a select committee of strategic competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. So what are you hearing about the impact additional tariffs might have on our diplomatic relationship with China?
I think it would, probably destabilize the situation a little more. I think it's one thing to, for instance, impose strategic tariffing where there is dumping or economic aggression, for instance, with regard to steel or aluminum or paper or certain consumer products. But I think that across the board tariffs, regardless of economic or security concerns, would only impose costs on American consumers, and it would impose costs at a time when we're going into the holiday season, where I think we're going to drive up the trade deficit because more retailers are going to buy more Chinese stuff as opposed to other stuff, knowing that tariffs are on the way. So it further hurts American producers.
What do you make of the Canadian Prime Minister going and taking some time to visit Mar-a-Lago to speak to the president-elect?
Well, I think that it looked like a happy occasion, him sitting at the table with President Trump and others. I think that to the extent that he's having discussions with them about what the impacts would be of having day one tariffs on Canadian imports, I think that's a good thing. Talking is always a good thing, but remember, if somebody calls your bluff on these threats, we're talking about massive, massive problems for the American economy on day one of the Trump administration.
Is there any cause for concern, the reaction that we've seen from the new Mexican president in response to these tariffs? I mean, we're seeing, diametrically opposed strategies from Canada and Mexico when essentially responding to the same threat.
Yeah, I don't think that Sheinbaum is necessarily one who's going to be as conciliatory. She's coming off a big win in her own election. And I think at this point, one of the things that we have to do is, for instance, with regard to the fentanyl problem or with regard to illegal immigration, is we need increased cooperation with those elements of her law enforcement that are not corrupt, and there are some. And we need to, bind closer to them so that we can deal with these problems productively. If we don't, if we go the way of confrontation, then we could actually make these problems worse and have higher prices for Americans and lead to retaliatory tariffs and further our problems in terms of isolating ourselves related to countering aggression from China and other foreign adversaries.
You're our second Democratic congressman on this morning, and I want to get the same question into you as I did to him, where we look towards the future on who could possibly lead the Democratic Party in 2028. According to a new list from the Hill, these are the names swirling as top contenders. You see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, J.B. Pritzker, of course, some notable names that we know from the past, like California Governor Gavin Newsom, and of course, Vice President Kamala Harris, who just ran her own campaign. So when you take a look at this list, or possible names that aren't on this list but come to the top of your mind, who do you believe should be the top of the ticket come 2028?
Wow, you're really trying to get me into trouble here, Alex. Obviously, I'm partial to my own governor,
Yes.
J.B. Pritzker, who's been an excellent governor, and of course Kamala Harris. I thought ran a very good campaign. I think at the end of the day, it's about articulating a vision to enable Americans to realize their economic aspirations and economic dreams. I think that's what came out loud and clear in this election. It turned out in the exit polling, 70% of voters said that they thought the economy was poor or not good, and 70% of them voted for Trump. And so we as Democrats have got to recognize that and meet people where they are, and then figure out how do we allow people to better themselves and their families economically.
Yeah, I think you were just leading into what my next question might be, which would be changes that the Democratic Party could be making, or perhaps the candidate who's at the top of the ticket. I guess to answer that question, what went wrong in 2024? What can be changed as we approach 2028? Is it specific messaging that this candidate could be putting out, or is it paying more attention to voters where they're at?
I think I just have two observations. One is that it's one thing to tell people that inflation is under control, but it's another to say that costs are actually going down. And we have to do everything we can to make healthcare, education, groceries, gas, and other staples, including housing, more affordable, meaning the costs have to actually go down, not just stabilize at a level that's maybe 20% higher than it was 4 years ago. The second issue is I respectfully submit that we have to spend more time on issues such as the one that I have with my Republican colleagues as well, which is skills-based vocational and career technical education. 2/3 of Americans do not have a four-year college degree, but for them, they don't have a world-class post-secondary education system. And until and unless we address that particular issue, we, A, won't enable them to get on the up escalator of the economy into a middle-class lifestyle, and then B, we won't be able to fill the jobs of the future, the vacancies that exist in the workforce for technologies of the future, so we can actually beat the Chinese and any other country in the global economic competition to come.
Yeah, no one can predict the future. I just wonder what our top issues are going to be come 2028 and what these candidates are going to be saying to actually address them. In the meantime, we can focus on what you can share with us now, and we're thankful for you. Illinois Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, appreciate you joining News Nation Live today.
Thank you, Alex.
Meanwhile,